A gute Woche, a gesunde Woche, a mazel dicke Woche. Motzoi Shabbos, but it is Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. We know that in the Torah we have 2 times the pinnacle, the highest point of Midas Harachamim and Chesed. That's when the Pasuk says that Moshe Rabbeinu said, Hashem Keil Rachum V'Chanun Erech Apayim V'Rav Chesed V'Emes Notzer Chesed Lo Alofim Nosei Ovom V'Fesha V'Chato V'Nakei Lo Yenakeh. But those last words are not part of it, only the first 13 words. Then you find in Parsha Shlach, once again, the same thing mentioned, minus a few words. And as the Arizal says, in the first group of words, there's 13 words. It says, Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim. The second group of words has 9. Also Midas Harachamim, but one level lower. And that's the 3 weeks, says the Arizal. From Shiva Asar B'Tammuz until Rosh Chodesh Av is exactly 13 days. And the next 9 days, Rosh Chodesh Av through Tisha B'Av, is the other set in Parsha Shlach. That is said, the Midas Harachamim, the Shemos, the names of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because even though it looks to us like the most tragic times, I told you a week ago or 2 weeks ago that Tammuz and Av, says the Arizal, are the unfortunate lack of mazel months. And until Chamisha Asar B'Av, which comes in another almost 4 weeks, that's when it's transformed and transposed completely to Midas Harachamim. And the Mekubalim explain, and the Arizal talks about it, and the Bnei Yissaschar talks about it, that even though it looks like sad times, and it was very sad, but it's in a very temporary format because the essence of it is the Yud Gimel Midas Harachamim through those days, and then the 9 days of Av, and that propels us into a realm that is so high and so happy that now we can't see it because it's when the Geula Shlema is going to come. But in its essence and its base, it's Kula Rachamim. And that's why Tzaddikim said that Sukkot, which is 9 days, because you have 7 days of Sukkot, and you have 2 days at the end, Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. And the Tzaddikim said that the whole Simcha of Simchas Torah and those 9 days comes from Rosh Chodesh Av through Tisha B'Av. Because those are the days of Geula. In other words, we know that Mashiach is born on Tisha B'Av. And that, what does it mean born? He's born into every generation, and he's ready to be Megala, to reveal himself in an instant when HaKadosh Baruch Hu tells him. But the essence of those days until Mashiach are sad. But then there's going to be a springboard, as the Arizal says, that even Shabbos Chazon is the biggest Shabbos of the year, because Shabbos has to be mashpia on the whole week, and if in that week comes Tisha B'Av, then that is the week that's producing Mashiach. And that essence of those 9 days flows into Sukkot, and we have the Ushpizin, and we have, because everyone begins to feel the Hisoyrus of Geula, the Geula Shlema. So it's hard to understand, but one tzaddik once said that when somebody loses a father or mother, lo aleinu, lo aleichem, they're devastated. They're crying, they're sad, they sit Shiva, they say Kaddish, they learn Mishnayos. But when Tchias HaMesim is going to happen, and that father or mother shows up and is together with the whole family, that simcha is going to be an unbelievable simcha. And that's the bechina of like the 3 weeks, which is sad, but in its shoirish it has tremendous depth of simcha. And we even have a taste of it every year when it comes to Sukkot, and it draws it down from those 9 days of Rosh Chodesh Av through Tisha B'Av. So we see that there is an interesting panorama of the days that we go through, and we were told to fast, and it's sad days, and we know that 5 things happened on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, because like the Arizal says, it's a month, and from its Rosh Chodesh spills over and drenches the month with the ability for sadness to happen. Moshe Rabbeinu came down and broke the Luchos. He was 40 days on the mountain after Matan Torah. Vav Sivan, 40 days later, is Shiva Asar B'Tammuz. And the walls by the second Bais Hamikdash, because they were both destroyed on Tisha B'Av, on the 9th day of Av. But the walls of the city of Yerushalayim and that general burnt a Sefer Torah and then put an idol into the Heichal, into the Bais Hamikdash, into the innermost sanctum of it. So there were terrible things that happened. And the Talmud, they stopped, and we're going to talk about it in just a moment, that every single day, 365 days a year, they brought the Talmud Shel Shachar and the Talmud Shel Bein Ho'arbayim. We daven Shachris and Mincha Keneged that, those two. And it was brought 365 days a year, on Shabbos, on Yom Kippur, on every weekday, every day of the year. Now, when did they stop bringing in the Bais Hamikdash that korban? It was on Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, because they couldn't get the animals. The enemy was already there, and they couldn't get the animals. They had to stop being makriv the Talmud Shel Shachar and the Talmud Shel Bein Ho'arbayim. Now, in this week's Sedra, which upcoming Sedra is Parshas Pinchas. And in Pinchas you have the Kriya of every Rosh Chodesh. Tzavos b'nei Yisrael v'yamarta aleihem es korbani lachmi leishai. Anyway, that's the Kriya, and that's from Parshas Pinchas. When it comes to the korban, es hakeves echad taseh b'boker, we find that those 2 or 3 psukim are in Parshas Tetzaveh in Sefer Shemos, and it's exactly the same thing, every letter of every word. A replica, the 2 in Pinchas, and the mentioning in Parshas Tetzaveh. One exception, and I said it to you, I think 2 years ago, from Reb Chaim Soloveitchik, that one place it says, Es hakeves ha'echad ta'aseh v'boker, with a hey. And in the other place, there is no hey. Es hakeves echad ta'aseh v'boker. And what is that for? Explained Reb Chaim that if any day there, let's say in the morning, they couldn't find an animal, they didn't bring that Tamid Shel Shachar, you could still bring the afternoon, with one exception. And that's what we learn out from that hay that's in one place, and in the other place the word is without the hay. That if on the first day that the Mishkan functioned, and if they didn't have one of the times a animal to be makriv, there was some problem, you could not bring the other one that day. Because beginnings require perfection. When people get married, they have to set up the house. Okay, in 9 months we'll have an oirich on Shabbos. The very first Shabbos after Sheva Brachos have the oirich. How you set the pace and the system and the actual traveling through your lifetime with your partner for the next 70 years, 80 years, 90 years, start off on the right foot. The first night after Sheva Brachos, be in the Beis HaMedrash to have your kviyas of an hour or 2 hours. Don't sit back and, okay, tonight I'm a little tired, tonight I have a chasna, tonight. Instill it into the system and the regulation of your life, the things that are important. Perfection is required by the beginning. So says Reb Chaim, that we learn out the halacha, that if one is not available, you can bring the other, but not if the first day that it starts, you must have perfection, and therefore you must have morning and afternoon available, or you can't bring either. Now, in our parsha, the Medrash interestingly says that there was a discussion of Tanoim, and their Rebbe asked them, went down the line and said, which pasuk do you think is the most outstanding in the Chamisha Chumshei Torah? And we know that Ben Zoima answered and said that he held that the pasuk of Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that signifies the unity of Klal Yisrael, proclaiming the oneness and the unity with Klal Yisrael of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of God Himself. And that's what Ben Zoma said. But Ben Nanas said that he held, and these are all Tanoim, that the pasuk V'ahavta l'reyacha kamocha is the most outstanding, distinguished pasuk in the Torah. Because the whole inyan of unity of Klal Yisrael depends on our attitudes to another Jew. And if somebody is slanted and he goes through 20 or 30 years, well, this guy I don't like, and that one I don't care for, and that one, why? Because of something he once said. What, you went through 30, 40 years holding it against the guy? A grudge? But to polish and to develop and to thrive for that goal of loving each and every Jew, that Benanas said he held was the most important pasuk of the Torah. But then we came to Ben Azai, and Ben Azai said he held Es hakeves echad tasev haboker. Now, if I went out into a group of 500 Yidden, and I asked each one of them, which pasuk in the Torah do you think is the most rare and remarkable, distinct pasuk? Some would say Shema Yisrael. Some would say V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. But I doubt that anyone would say Es hakeves echad tasev haboker. And the Rebbe of these Tanoim, when they got done saying, he said, Roya ani es divarecha mikulam. On the pasuk Es hakeves echad tasev haboker. He held that Ben Azai chose the most outstanding single pasuk in the entire Torah. Why did he feel that way? And why did the Rebbe say, oh, that's the pasuk, you hit it right on the nail? So the Mefarshim explain, because in Yiddishkeit and in growing in our Avodas Hashem, constancy and consistency is the most important backbone of the entire structure, because it's a mitzvah that we do every single day. Every single day. Tefillin is choshev, but on Shabbos and Yom Tov we don't put on tefillin. And the reason that we put a talis on before the tefillin is because a talis we do put on every single day of the year. We wear a talis Shabbos, we wear a talis Yom Tov, Yom Kippur, Rosh Hashanah, a talis. And that's why Todir, She'eno Todir, Todir Koidem. So we put on the talis first. But one of the biggest problems discussed and described by the Balei Musar, by tzaddikim, Hasidish tzaddikim, and the Balatanya said that you have to learn every day Choivas Halavavos, which was around 500 years before him. But the essence of the Kedusha and the sprinkling of Yiras Shamayim deep into the hearts of each and every Yid who learns it, as tzaddikim said about, let's say, Choivas Halavavos, there is often the reference to the fact that we have to grow, but we can't slip back. You see, on Rosh Hashanah, we say we have a lot of promises. This year, Rabbanu Shalom, I'm not going to slack off for 6 weeks in my learning. I'm not going to miss 10 dafim in a month of learning Gemara. I'm not going to miss out on a day of tzedakah. And we have lofty, beautiful Kabbalahs, meaning resolutions. And we mean it sincerely. And we begin to follow up right after Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Yom Tov. And then suddenly 3 months in, we went out of town for 3 days for 2 chasnas, and we suddenly missed the next 3 weeks. Once we were taken away, then we lose our foothold. So Ben Azai chose Es HaKeves Echad because it showed that we can do something and hang on to it and not to deviate and miss days or hours of whatever we set out to do in our growth and in our avodas Hashem. So he held that consistency, never missing a day, like as hakeves echad taseva boker, it was every shachris and it was every mincha. That's the backbone to realization and to bring to full flourish our growth in our avodas Hashem. And that's why he chose that pasuk specifically. Now, our Sedra, as all Sedras are, but here you see it pointed out like unbelievable, that it's colorful and everything, that there is a counting, and that's why it's called numbers, Bamidbar, because there were two countings in this Chumash. The first Sedra of Bamidbar, and now in Pinchas, again a counting. And one of the interesting countings that I also said to you maybe 2 or 3 years ago was the fact that the Chafetz Chaim pointed out that we can never look at someone and try to size them up. You know, you many times hear from a teacher, oh, that student is going to be a trailblazer wherever she's going to live, and she'll be a menahelis in a Bais Yaakov or in a school with 5,000 What a personality. And we know that in our own minds, we think back to our class, and there were some that were riding high, learning in day and night, and beautiful. And they ended up simple people, some regular balabatim, some, regular whatever. And what they thought was going to be was not as great in actuality as they thought. And the 3 guys in the back that hardly knew the Gemara and whatever, something ignited in their hearts and in their personalities, and they soared heavenward, became dynamic rabbanim and nahalim. They became leaders in their community, even as balabatim. They led the daf yomi with the 50 people in the room and never missed a day. So said the Chafetz Chaim, we can never size people up. And where do you see it from most? He cited our Sedra. He said, take a look at Binyamin. Binyamin was a shevet of 45,000. And Dan was a shevet of 65, almost 65,000, 64,700 or 800, almost 65,000. 20,000 more than Binyamin. Yet Binyamin had 10 sons, and Dan had only 1 son. So if someone would have asked, before the children got married, which shevet do you think is going to be bigger, Dan or Binyamin? They would have said Binyamin. Binyamin has 10 sons. How could he not be bigger? And Dan has only 1 son, and the son was handicapped. He was deaf. Like the Gemara says that when Yaakov Avinu got to Ma'aras HaMachpelah, they didn't bury him right away because Esav showed up. The Gemara in Soita says this. Esav showed up and said, what are you doing? And they said, well, we're about to bury our father. And he said, oh, no, you're not. That 8th place, that 8th burial place, I'm supposed to be with Leah. It's mine. And they said, no, you sold it. He said, show me proof that I sold it. And they didn't have the shtar. It was left in Mitzrayim. So the Gemara says they got Naphtali, who was a marathon runner, to run back to Mitzrayim and to bring the shtar that Esav sold, the spot, the kever. to Yaakov. And a few hours later, after Naphtali left, because as fast as he was, it had to take some time, Chushim, the son, the one son of Dan, asked, what's the delay? Why are we all standing? He was deaf. He didn't know what was going on. So they, through sign language, told him that we got to prove that it's ours because Esav is claiming, and he took a club and knocked off his head, killed him, and the head rolled into Maras HaMachpelah, where it remains till today, because you see, as the Arizal explains in other Kadmonim and Mekubalim, the Shoirish of Esav was bigger than Yaakov. That's the reason that Yitzchak was thirsty. He knew he wasn't behaving properly, but he thought that through the proper mixture of patience, love, and learning, he'll get him back to his original status. And that's why he wanted to give him the brachas, birchas Yitzchak, that he gave to Yaakov. And realized with his Ruach HaKodesh, after the mistake was made and he was fooled, the first thing he did is he gave a bracha to Yaakov Avinu. He didn't call him in and say, what did you do? You fooled me and you said this and you said that. He didn't say any criticism to him. The pasuk says he called him in to send him to go do a shidduch, and the first thing the pasuk says, Vayavorech oso. He benched him. He blessed him. No criticism. So the point being that we would have said that Binyamin's going to be the biggest, for sure, more than Dan, and Dan turned out to be the second biggest Shevet. Only Yehuda was bigger than Dan. So the potential and the inner glow of personality and ability doesn't shine forth always as quickly as we think. And the mere fact someone at 12 or 14 is so outstanding that that's how it's going to be his entire life. Mazel plays an important factor. Family circumstance. There's some people, lo aleinu 1,000 times, that in the family the children are young and they're glowing, they're wonderful, and the father suddenly, lo aleinu, dies. It changes the fabric of the entire family, and that person that had great promise, it could be that his spirit was so broken, and the effect of death or circumstance in a family can change the whole picture for the next 80 years, 60 years, whatever it is. So the Chavetz Chaim said, never judge and never think you know the end of the story. Now, we also have in the Sedra the story of the Benos Tzolofchad. Tzolofchad, there's a debate in the Gemara whether he was a tzaddik or a rasha. Tzolofchad, when they were in the Midbar, in the beginning, he went and chopped wood on Shabbos. And he's called the Mekoshesh Eitzim. One opinion in the Gemara is that he did it l'shem shemaim. He was a tzaddik gomer, but he saw that the people were not grasping the halachas with Shabbos to the nth degree, the way they should have, or the way they wanted to have. So he went out purposely and started chopping wood so that at the end he'd be put to death. He was put into jail because Moshe Rabbeinu didn't even know what punishment to give him. So they asked Hashem, and he said that he has a death penalty because he was warned, and they came out and said, you're not allowed to do it. But he wanted to teach the people what the halacha and how severe Chil Shabbos is. So there's an opinion in the Gemara, as I said just now, that he was a tzaddik because he wanted to give up his life to make sure that he brought up the Klal Yisrael, that they would have clarified the severity of Chil Shabbos. And there's another opinion that he was a rasha. He simply went out and he did it for whatever reasons, and he was put to death. Now, he had no sons, the pasuk says, but he had 5 daughters. And these 5 daughters stepped forward when the whole Klal Yisrael was standing around, and Moshe and Aaron, and they came forward and they asked a shaila in front of everybody. Our father died and he didn't have any sons, and we're about to go into Eretz Yisrael, and everyone's going to get their chelik, their portion in Eretz Yisrael. But the halacha is that a boy, a son, inherits, not the girls. And we don't want to lose the portion that would have been given to our father. So Moshe Rabbeinu said to them, I'm going to have to ask this shaila to the Rabbana Shalom. Now, why did Moshe Rabbeinu have to ask the Rabbana Shalom? He was the one that was makabel the Torah on Har Sinai, and then he spent his days and weeks and months, all his time, teaching Klal Yisrael Torah. And it even says in the Gemara that the day that Moshe Rabbeinu was nifter, Klal Yisrael forgot 3,000 halachas, because it was like the cement between all the bricks. And if you pull out the cement, the bricks come falling down. And Moshe Rabbeinu was the backbone of remembering the Torah. And when he left the world in one day, they got mixed up in 3,000 halachas of the hundreds of thousands of halachas. So it shows you he was the backbone of remembering the Torah. And he went and said, I can't answer you, I have to ask the Rabbana Shalom. And the Mefarshim asked this question. He knew everything. He taught them every halacha. How could it be that this thing he had to go ask the Rabbana, and he didn't know the psak halacha himself? So they answer and say, because if you look at what the girls said, and by the way, they were 5 spinsters, the Medrash says, none of them were married, and the youngest was 40 years old. And the Medrash says that when they were telling Moshe Rabbeinu the Shaila, they threw out the statement, Vehu lo haya ba'adas Korach. We want you to know, Moshe Rabbeinu, that our father was not part of your enemy group, Korach, with the rebellion. Once Moshe Rabbeinu heard that, he felt there was negias. They were trying possibly to sweeten the atmosphere like a bribe. Oh, don't think he was with your enemies. He was in your camp. That statement puzzled Moshe Rabbeinu, the Mefarshim say, for him to answer the shaila that they asked. He knew what the psak was, but he didn't want it to come from him. Once they said he was not part of Korach's thing, they tainted the atmosphere. And when we make decisions, we have to make sure that honesty prevails. That if the kids all want ice cream and you don't want to spend the money for the ice cream, don't come back, well, it's not healthy for you, I'm not in the mood of driving over to the ice cream store. Don't set up our system in our own minds and hearts to rationalize with answers and postures which are not true, but it fits the situation very well. Like someone who thinks, who cares about the truth? Or let me think what I'm supposed to do in this situation, given the circumstances, that I should come out smelling like a rose. And that's why the girls passled Moshe Rabbeinu, and the answer came from Hashem, Cain, Dovros, Benos, Solovchod. Yes, they're right. Nason titein lohem. You should give to them the achuzah of their father. And from that, the halacha is that the sons, and if a son wants to fight his sisters when the parents die, there have been plenty dinei Torah that give them the right to do it. But if the father wants to go against the halacha and wants to make sure that everyone gets, all the boys and girls, the sons and daughters get an equal share, they're allowed to do it also. And you have to look into the Rishonim of the justification and why and how and what. But you could do this or that. There were big fights in families because the boys said, listen, I'm the son, and fly a kite to the girls, which left terrible over money to go break up an entire family. But the shoirish of Yerusha remained. That's why the pasuk says, the Rabbanu Shalom said, Nason titein lohem, with a mem at the end. Lohem means to boys. That's a masculine expression of lohem. They should have said, the pasuk should have said, lohen, with a nun. So it tells us that yes, they can get, but you should know, lohem, that this all stems from the halachas of the men. Lohem, the halacha which applies to them and they're first in line and all of that, it's lohem, and it's from that we're drawing down the response to the Benos Tzolofcha, that they get a chunk as a Yerusha, a part in Eretz Yisrael. Now, in our parsha, it also says that Moshe Rabbeinu, right after this story with the Benos Tzolofcha, said to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Rabbanu Shalom, my days are numbered and I'm going to be dying and buried here, Ever LaYarden. So it's a time to appoint my successor. And he wanted his sons to take over. And Rashi brings that he said, he didn't say it has to be someone who's the biggest Talmud Chacham, or it has to be someone who does the greatest chesed, or from the Sanhedrin. It doesn't have to be. My successor has to be, as Rashi quotes, Soivel kol echad v'echad, that he has the patience to love and be and tolerate each and every yid. You see, when you have a rov of a shul of 100 people, on an issue that's burning in that shul, you may have 50 different opinions. And some of the opinions may despise you, that you think it's ugly, that it's out of order, and it's something that should not be done, and the Rav feels that the other group is correct. And does that mean that the Rav looks at that other group of people with disdain and with hatred or dislike, or he has to have tolerance for everyone, no matter what their opinion and approach is to an issue that comes up? And I can guarantee you, there is no shul where someone has been a Rav 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, that this situation doesn't arise. How many people have left shul? Oh, the Rav agreed with them, goodbye. The shul down the block is just as good, and gives up 20 years of davening there. Because intolerance. So we have to have the tolerance of being able to be soivel each and every person. That goes for a teacher in a classroom. It goes for a Rav of a shul. It goes for a menahel dealing with his faculty and the parent body. You hear it all the time. A menahel says, oh, that parent, I can't stand to even talk to them. They're so mishuga. You have to exude. Remember last week I told you? 2 weeks ago, when there was no water, according to the Rambam, the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu turned to Klal Yisrael and said, Shimu no hamoirim, you rebellious people, listen and see now what's going to happen. And because he said that, says the Rambam, Lo hayu b'Yisrael mi Moshe v'ad Moshe lo haya, that lo hayu b'Yisrael, that how big the Rambam was, he didn't hold because it was you hit the rock. It was because he showed intolerance with the people. That's why he wasn't allowed into Eretz Yisrael. So over here, Moshe Rabbeinu thought, the Mefarshim explain, oh, from the story that just happened with Bnei Slavka, they really weren't entitled to get a chelek in Eretz Yisrael. Yerusha is for a boy, and he had no sons, so he should lose his chelek. But since HaKadosh Baruch Hu paskened that they should get, so even when you're sometimes not entitled, because the Medrash says that Moshe Rabbeinu knew that his 2 sons were great, and they lived through with Kedusha and Tahara being in Mitzrayim. So they were great and very deserving. But Moshe Rabbeinu said that they're not perfect leaders, but you just chose by the Bnei Slavka an imperfect situation to award them land. So I'm hoping, Rabbanan Shalom, that you will allow my sons to have the leadership, even though they're not perfect, and even though there are others that are better than them to have the position. But you chose the imperfect by the Bnei Slavka. That's why he spoke up, as you see the Psukim tell us, immediately after the story of Bnei Slavka. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu said that it doesn't go by this leadership role, the whole Klal Yisrael doesn't go automatically to the sons. Like in Kahuna, that if someone's a Kohen Gadol and he dies, his son is the first one they look at. Is he Roy? Is he able? Does he have the backbone to assume the role of Kahuna Gedolah? But not in this case. It had to go to someone that HaKadosh Baruch Hu felt was so outstanding in who he was, Yehoshua ben Nun, that he explained to him that it has to go to Yehoshua ben Nun, as I mentioned to you a number of weeks ago, that Yehoshua ended up marrying Rochav Hazoina, having 2 daughters with her, and from those 2 daughters came out that the daughters' grandchildren, great-grand, there were 8 Kohanim Gedolim that came out from Yehoshua ben Nun and Rochav. Now, I want to say to you that in the Parsha, if you look in Parshas Vayigash, way back in Bereshis, you will see that Yisachar is pronounced Yisachar with 2 shins, or 2 sins. And then in the very next naming of the genealogy of Klal Yisrael, when it talks about Shevet Yisachar, the son is called, no, I'm sorry. The first time it's mentioned, it's just Yov. That was his name, one son, one of his 4 sons, Yov. And he complained to Yisachar and said, why did you name me a name of Avodah Zorah? Avodah Zorah, that's what you gave me? Yisachar, the Medrash says, agreed. He made a terrible mistake. And he said, I'm taking one of the 2 sins, the shins, from my name and giving it to you. That's why the Balkany, when Yisachar was born in Parshas Vayetze, we pronounce it with both shins, Yisachar. But the very next time, when his name is listed with the shin, that he's called Yoshuv, because Yisachar put into Yov the shin, it's now called, the Balkany only says Yisachar, not Yisachar. Munkach has a separate minhag that every time it's read, it's Yisachar. But most of the Hasidic world and the Litvish world, the second time the name is mentioned, from Yov to Yoshuv, it's pronounced Yoshuv, because that's what it was changed to. And Yisachar, after giving one of the shins, it's pronounced just Yisachar. Now, I want to just take a minute to go back to the beginning of our Parsha. We have to remember that Pinchas was given a gift of kahuna, v'hoyasa lo ulazaro acharav beris kahuna soila. Kahuna was given just to Aaron and his son Elazar. In the beginning, it was not meant to be forever in that family. And it was not meant to be in the family, but after Pinchas did such a heroic act of taking on for the Rabbanu Shalom his honor, it put him into a position, Pinchas, that from his father Elazar, he inherited the kahuna, and it remained forever till Mashiach. The children and sons and grandsons and great-grand of Pinchas, because of what he did. Now, if I would ask you, what kind of reward would you give to Pinchas for what he did? Very few of you would give him the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, he took a spear that was miraculously elongated, became gigantically long, and he threw it, and it hit exactly in the spot that he wanted to kill Cosby Basur and Zimri ben Solu. It was a miracle. But he killed 2 people. And you see that the Shevet Shimon were up in arms. Your grandfather fed to his idols to fatten them and keep them healthy and well, thinking that they were something, and you had the chutzpah and audacity and arrogance to go kill a Shevet, to kill a Nasi b'Yisrael from Shevet Shimon? Zimri ben Solu was a Nasi. He did a terrible thing, but who are you to go kill him? That's what they, look at the first Rashis. Ben Puti Zeh. Somebody who went and fattened idols with food and served them, because Yisro was his other grandfather. Aaron was one grandfather, but Elazar married the daughter of Yisro. And we know Yisro did tshuva, that he became a yid and all of that. But that was the criticism. And the answer Meforshim say that he got the Barisi Shalom, even though he killed 2 people, because you're not allowed to kill. And there's a lot of things you're not allowed to do. But you have to have the seichel and understanding, or you ask someone what to do. In a case where you're not supposed to do, that you have to do, you do the right thing. And right thing means shalom. That means shalom doesn't always mean, oh, they're arguing, you know what, be mevata, look aside. If a Rav paskined in a shul, you're not allowed to do this and that. You can't say to the Rav, look, why are you stirring up machloikis? And if the Rav says, I'm telling you that lahalacha, there is no heter to do X, Y, and Z, and I have to have the backbone to paskin and to be able to make clear to the people that this is what we do and this isn't what we don't, this is what we don't do. I have to be ready to take the heat and to be able to do the right thing. And that's for every parent and for every teacher, as I always say to you, and every menayel, that you have to analyze and you have to give consideration sincerely and slowly. And if you're in doubt, to ask someone, don't be embarrassed to get the advice of someone who may be more learned than you or in a better position of understanding the situation. But we can't go with an attitude sometimes of just like with Pinchas, that he had to come and take action for HaKadosh Baruch Hu that moment. And Shimon and Levi, because let's not forget, Pinchas is from Shevet Levi. His father was they were Leviim. I mean, Leviim and the Chelik of Kohanim. And in the beginning, by Shechem and Chamor, it was Shimon and Levi who were partners in crime. But now they parted because the Sfarim say that Aaron HaKohen stood for the kavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And Shimon stood and went out to kill them for a different reason. They did the same action, but the action was for the kavod of the mishpacha of Shevet Shimon. So here they parted ways. Pinchas, who was from Aaron, from Shevet Levi, he took action against Shechem and the whole town because this was a violation of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Bais Yaakov, to violate her the way he did, you don't do this. And it was kavod of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But Shimon was more worried at that point with his sister Dinah, the kavod of the mishpacha. So now when it had to take on for the kavod of the mishpacha, they cried out and said, what did you do here, Pinchas? Our mishpacha, our nasi, went and was killed by you. It was the kavod of the mishpacha. We try, and we should try and endeavor in every which way to elevate the tranquility and peace and good feeling and Avos Yisrael amongst Klal Yisrael in our homes, in our communities, our neighbors, everyone. But there is a time that sometimes you have to stop and think and realize that we all have to take a stand, l'kovid halacha, l'kovid the Torah, and l'kovid HaKadosh Baruch Hu.